The Part 2 ending of The Castle, Part 1 down below. I wish I had allowed someone to mentor me who would hold me accountable for holding her accountable. I surrounded myself those 6 months post-discovery of emotional affair with people who were in line with my goal, keeping the marriage intact. The ones who were telling me to pull the strings on what didn't make sense, I pushed out of my life. I think I couldn't handle the way they delivered the information. They spoke to me as if they knew something I didn't know, which was the reality, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't. I wish someone had spent time to gain my trust and understand what I was dealing with emotionally. My life turned upside down. I wish someone had asked me how I felt, what I was feeling, told me to stop making excuses and asked me to figure it out, stood by me and guided me to the answers that were all there. I wish I had not allowed my ex-wife the platform to stand on after the emotional affair. The one where she told me what I was doing wrong and I was too afraid to tell her. You cheated on me, and I wish I had expected her to fix that. It wasn't my place to. I wish I hadn't taken on ownership of her mistakes myself. I rationalized a lot. I am glad I spent the time to get to the bottom of things. I am happy I didn't blow up and become jaded, bitter, and angry at her. I am glad I didn't destroy any possibility of a future where her and I could work together to raise our daughters. I'm glad I can look back and feel foolish but not regret what I put up with for the sake of my daughters. So, I could today really know I never left them. Specifics. I wish I had put a listening device in her car. I was stupid not to. I wish I had recorded more of our conversations. In Virginia, it's a one-party consent to record. I wish I had taken time to think about what I needed from this. I wish I had asked myself, if I had an emotional affair, what would I do to prove to my spouse that I could be trusted again? I wish I had written that out and given it to my ex and not put up with any excuses about not following the list. Custody. I wish I had not given my ex-spouse 70% custody time. Short-sighted view. She wanted to stay at home with girls while they got to an age old enough to both be in school. Verbal talks between us about then going to 50-50 aren't legal and carry no weight now. It's not in writing. No surprise her stance on it has since changed. I am now in a constant struggle to get it to 50-50, and the whole system works against you there. I wish I had not offered to give her spousal support for 5 years at 50% what it would have been had there been no contest. I did this thinking it was for my daughter's best interest to have their mother at home with them. She had me convinced she wanted to go back to school for a master's during those 5 years, and that our youngest, with medical issues, would benefit from her care rather than being in daycare while with me 50% of the time. It comes as no surprise to you guys that as soon as our separation agreement was signed and she started receiving the $2,000 a month spousal and $14 a month child support, she immediately got a job and dropped out of school. She now lives with her parents. The spousal payments stop in a few months. That's a milestone. How foolish of me. I wish I had told more people about her affair while I was in the thickest of it. I really believe the best is to get the word out to everyone as soon as possible. I chose to only tell my close friends and family, believing that she would be a better mother to our daughters if her life wasn't destroyed by everyone knowing her darkest secrets. What I didn't realize is this created a scenario where she, with her BPD, could use the situation for her own sympathy gathering. She never told anyone directly that I did wrong, but she's passively painted a picture of the poor ex who was left by a husband who no longer wants to support her. I had to learn to not care about that. I had to learn that people's opinions who I don't know don't matter to me. That is a process I'm still resolving. As for the discovery of the physical affair, I do believe that if I had discovered it was a physical affair on November 8th, or at any point, I would have left immediately. I am trying to think of how I could have uncovered that quicker. I should have stood tough to my gut feelings. I should have searched for answers, rather than moving so quickly to blame myself for parts of this that had nothing to do with me. So that is the key here, and for everyone who has discovered their spouse in an emotional affair, that is the one piece I would highlight from my story as a lessons learned. If you suspect your spouse is cheating, they are. It's painful, but you need to get to the bottom of it. You don't have to be mean. You actually shouldn't directly engage. You should immediately turn pie, as soon as you can. You should tell all of your family and friends that interact with your spouse on a regular basis, and you should ask them to tell you if they see anything out of the ordinary. A lot of stories from my friends came out after our separation. Many of them had the same endings. I wish I had told you. I figured it wasn't my business. A lot of our mutual friends saw the signs, same signs I saw. If I had asked them, or they had brought it up to me, suddenly two people talking leads to answers. This is what cheaters bank on. People not sharing details. Despite all the wishes above, I have no regrets. I can't exactly say what her family thinks of her. I have a lot of assumptions based on passive observation, added together with how their family dynamics seem to be as I experienced them during the marriage. I'll try to keep it to facts and try to make it obvious what's opinion. I believe her mother knew about the affairs the whole time. Opinion based on how she talked to me after it came out when we separated. She didn't seem surprised or very remorseful on behalf of her daughter, more scared than anything, inquisitive about what my next step was. I believe my ex-wife and her mother both hid the facts from her stepfather. My ex-wife and I lived in separate rooms in our house for a few months until we sold it. She moved in with her parents and has been there ever since, coming up on 2 years. My ex-wife continued a relationship with emotional affair guy. His car would be in the driveway at her parents' house regularly, almost seemed planned, as to coincide with my pickup and drop-off times for my daughters. For the first few months her parents were never there. Their relationship seemed to be hidden from her parents. That winter, 3 months after separation, my daughters started talking about the physical nature of their mother's relationship with emotional affair guy. Seeing them kissing. This was something I reacted to and confronted my ex about. She explained her intent was not for the girls to walk in on them kissing. I followed with, "These are your daughters. This is about them. Lock a door, please." I redirected it to them, not us, telling her they are fragile and need to adjust to this new situation. Spring 2014, this all changed, and it seemed the emotional affair guy was a welcome addition to their family. He was there when parents were there during drop-off and pickups. Around this time was the last conversation I had with my ex-wife's stepfather. In this conversation he told me some people just aren't meant to be, and went on to tell me his stepdaughter had found the true love of her life. Emotional affair guy. He followed with a Bible verse about God showing people the way to love. I cut him off and said, "Are you really quoting scripture to romanticize your daughter's infidelity?" His face turned to micro-expressions of rage, but he kept his composure. I followed by saying, "Look, I don't know what her mother told you, but Carly cheated on me with multiple men." He cut me off and said, "I already know the details. You don't need to tell me. Let's keep this about us." So, I asked inquisitively, "What would be your advice to me?" He continued with an explanation of how I should wait at least 2 years before finding another woman. He said, "The right one is out there for you." I can't tell what is more to blame for her parents reacting this way. I'd like to think they are putting up a strong front to support her outwardly, and behind the scenes are really aware of their daughter's part in this. I am fearful, though, that they are creating a fantasy around the facts to cover it all up in their own heads. I started to walk away and turned, then asked CJ, "I am curious. What was your hatred of me about?" He took a moment to think of an appropriate response and said very diplomatically, "Well, you know things get messy in divorces. You both made mistakes." I looked at him and said, "CJ, I know the last time we spoke you told me not to share details, but I can tell you that you do not know everything that happened, because your wife doesn't even know everything that happened. I wrote you a letter, and it's in draft on my computer. I was planning to send it tonight." He said, "Look, that is between you and my daughter. I just wanted to tell you I forgive you." I looked at him and said, "I'm going to send it. Anyway, please read it." He said, "Don't do that." And I left. My assumption here, opinion, is that they are finding it difficult to cope, because my ex's parents were both cheated on in their previous marriages. I believe that they are putting their daughter first, as they should, but that they are so traumatized by their own histories that they are protecting themselves from facing the reality that their daughter is a cheater. They both came to terms with emotional affair guy justifying it as her true love. Summer 2014, emotional affair guy slowly left the picture. My ex-wife explained to me during an exchange of the kids I just couldn't continue a relationship with him because of what he did. He took my daughter's father away from them. This comment made me sick, but I held back, bit my tongue, and just walked away from it. My ex-wife had taken no accountability at all for any of this. She was now vilifying emotional affair guy. There were signs her family was now vilifying him as well. She was already with a new guy, who I started to hear about from my daughters 3 months before emotional affair guy left the picture. Patterns repeating. This new guy who replaced emotional affair guy I met one time and really got a great impression of him. Him and I had 5 minutes to chat on our own, and he was very down to earth. A very passive nature, and seemed kind and empathetic. He told me that he had been divorced and asked me to let him know if I ever felt he was invading my turf, for lack of a better word, in my relationship with my daughters. He said, "You are their father." He has his own daughter a year older than my oldest. I really respected him for talking to me about that. Unfortunately, it appears him and my ex had a falling out this summer. It appears he still is around, but they are no longer dating. As for me, I very quickly fell into a relationship with a girl long distance after we separated, her in San Francisco and me in Virginia. It seems a bit textbook, I'm ashamed to say, but I guess normal. She was a lawyer that I met online through a forum, kind of like this. She was drawn toward my intelligence and introspection of everything I'd been going through. We started talking during the time I separated, and she was giving very good legal advice. I always went to my lawyer first, but she was a cheap alternative to share the details with and see what her take would be. She realized how loyal a guy I was, and I believe really fell for me in that. She always said I had an amazing quality to stick by my marriage despite how bad it was, saying that loyalty is hard to find in a good man. A month after the separation, we expressed feelings for one another and started to talk about a potential relationship. She was a smart girl and I think saw signs she was a rebound, and we logically talked through it. Imagine, a lawyer and an engineer, trying to rationalize that. I flew to Vegas in January 2014 and met me there for the first time. We really hit it off. However, looking back, I can see that this was certainly filling a void for me, emotionally, and the travel was something I never got to do in my marriage, so it was a feeling of getting back to myself. I justified it as perfect, because she was the opposite of my ex-wife. She was witty, smart, and logical. She was confident and ambitious. Our relationship seemed to be based on a revolving ability for us each to dissect each other's problems and talk through them, but the emotions never lined up. It was a fun, adventurous relationship, but summer 2014 I started to realize it was an escape for me, getting my mind off of my divorce. It was covering up the pain of what I had experienced. I started to objectively consider the future here and realized this just didn't fit. We broke up a year ago. Side note, yet another reason I wish I had outed the affair to more people in 2012 is because my ex-wife spun this long-distance relationship into the reason we separated. I learned later that many of her friends didn't even know we had separated. She would tell them she felt abandoned. Her circle of support seemed to eat that drama up because they had no idea we were in marriage counseling from a year prior, or any details about her multiple affairs. Again, with the BPD, always a victim. We had a signed separation agreement with a free from interference clause. There was no chance of reconciliation while we waited for divorce. Late 2014, a few months after the breakup with the girl in SF, she moved here for a career advancement and to be closer to her family in the area. It was clear she was trying to bring us back together as well, which I adamantly told her she needed to own and not do for me. We attempted to rekindle things during that time, off and on dating, but it just didn't feel right to me. We both remained very upfront about our desires and opinions on how things were going. She met my daughters during that time, but in the context of being a friend. I recognized I needed something different. Fall 2014 through spring of this year I worked on myself. I stopped looking and I started to really figure myself out. For the first time I felt happy on my own, and I realized, having gotten married so young, that I literally had never lived on my own. By myself, I started to enjoy that freedom to explore my own hobbies and interests. I focused on my daughters. I also focused on myself, not someone else, for the first time. I really got into photography as a hobby. Met a girl in that hobby and we immediately had a chemistry I've never felt before. We have been together now for a couple months. This one feels different and I recognize I am being myself with her. It's feeling very natural, and I've stopped analyzing for the first time. We are taking it slow, but so far, it's been incredible. She brings out a kid in me and turns my logic into emotions. She also shares the same morals and future plans about life. We will see where it leads. So far so good. Another 2 years later, final update. Fall 2012, found wife in emotional affair, went to marriage counseling for 9 months, decided to work on it. Fall 2013, found out affair had continued. It was physical that there were at least 3 other men she had affairs with as well. We separated. Winter 2015, divorce finalized. Update, she got remarried last summer, July 2016, the month following her last spousal support payment. It was a surprise, though a welcome one, because of the circumstances. My daughter, a few months prior, asked about multiple men in romantic relationships, with her mother seeking for me to clarify if this is similar to how I go out on dinner dates with both her and her sister. We've always had a very open dialogue. She's free to come to me and ask anything, and I never lie to her. There is a lot of security here, and I see she takes me up on this often, particularly when what she thinks is not aligning with what she's been told in the other home. I asked where she got that idea from, and she said it's what her mother told her when she asked why she was kissing and hugging different guys, and that her mother told her not to tell one about the other. Ugh. So, I confronted my ex-wife about this about a year ago, in a sense of, hey, none of my business what you do in your romantic life, but I want you to be aware of the view your daughters have into this and the questions they are coming up with from it. She said she appreciated me sharing this. And the next time I saw my daughters, she said Mommy really loves new husband's name, and we don't get to ever see the other guy again or his daughter. Problem solved. I guess maybe I'm naive to think that being remarried will stop the behavior. Really, my only concern about it anymore is how it impacts my daughters. I do find it peculiar how she's so careful to shield everyone from her indiscretion. Her friends and family all see her as so proper and well put together. Yet she allows her children a window into this devious behavior while coaching them and why it's okay in her own way. Anyway, a few weeks before they got married, I had a chance to grab dinner with the soon-to-be new husband. I get the impression he's a good guy, very empathetic. Surprisingly, he's a lot like me. Engineer, soft-spoken, very empathetic, deep thinker. He has his own son, 12, that he's been the primary parent of. Sounds like he's done very little dating and was focused entirely on raising his son. He described meeting my ex-wife a year and a half prior and that they took things slow, not introducing each other to their kids right away. They did it the right way, as he says, and being careful. This all kind of fit the above story, because he described meeting my daughters for the first time. The fall of 2015 seems to be when my daughters started asking the questions about multiple men. Anyway, I decided to not bring up our past, or the issues. I want them to last, and I think this guy adds stability to her life, and that will ultimately be a very positive thing for my daughters. It did seem like he had an idea that I just walked away from them. Her story, I abandoned them. He gave some guidance, in a nice way, through his stories about how important it is for me to be around and in the girls' lives and how he didn't want to get in the way of that. I really appreciate that, but I did correct him by letting him know just how involved I have been, coaching their sports, volunteering at their school, our date nights together, never missing an appointment or school activity. So, they are pregnant, due this fall. That is another positive in that it'll take some of her BPD issues and drama away from the scope of me and my daughters. She'll have her own new world of stresses to consider, and that also solidifies their relationship. It's not something that seems will fall apart anytime soon. He strikes me as the kind of guy who will work through any issues that come up. I have my own vision of things, and he seems highly intelligent, and I'm sure he'll get to the bottom of stuff as well. And actually, I really hope she changes. Maybe he'll help her in that, and this new baby as well. Through the fall and around Christmas time she started rejecting nights out that I've always had with my daughters. The history has been that during the 10-day period they are with her, I have them every other weekend Thursday to Sunday. I take one of the girls out to dinner for special one-on-one time. It's been an amazing thing for the girls, seeing them open up and they get so excited for this time with me. My youngest, who is a lot softer spoken, really becomes chatty when her sister isn't around. She shares her imagination and her stories about life. It's always taken place roughly around the 4th or 5th day between when I don't have them. This was never put into our PSA, however, it was roughly referenced as we each had access at all reasonable times so long as we coordinate in advance. That neither parent would restrict the kids from spending quality time with the other during the time they are with one or the other. Anyway, a hint of the issues arose around Thanksgiving. My ex requested to have the girls' Christmas time with me this year be cut shorter so they could spend more of it at her new house with her new family. I politely rejected this and said we would stick to the schedule in the PSA because my family already had time all planned out for the holidays. I asked her to consider what it would be like if I asked her to give up some of her holiday time with them. This is when she started rejecting date nights out with the girls. She would do it in very peculiar ways too. We had always worked these out in person when I dropped the girls off. Something like, hey, I'm free Thursday, I'll come get DD at 4 like usual. And so, she started by saying I'm sorry, we're busy this week. So, I said the whole week, okay, well how about next week, I can do it mon, 2 or wed. And she said let me check with my husband and get back to you. Then she wrote an email stating that her husband had a work colleague coming over and they couldn't accommodate my request at this time. So, the next time period I asked again. This time my daughter spoke up after I asked and said, Mom, please, we need the dinner date. How about Thursday? And so her mother said okay, Thursday should work. Then she wrote me an email that same night saying I don't appreciate you making your daughter ask me on the spot like that. I checked with my husband and we are busy Thursday. You cannot come get her, and in the future, I'd appreciate if everything is in writing so I don't look like the bad guy having to say no. Also, I hope you'll respect my new family and our time together. I have a right to develop my own family relationships with them. It was over the top absurd. So, this continued for 2 more cycles to the point where I had enough emails from her to prove a point, alienation even, and I took it to my lawyer. My lawyer recommended that I write up a schedule for all of 2017, date nights for the whole year, 24 in total, matching the frequency we'd done in the past, so I did and sent it to her. She wrote back, thank you for providing the only dates that work for you in 2017, but it's a bit much to expect me to set all these dates aside right now. I don't want to let our daughters down by not being able to live up to them. Now that I have your preferred dated, I'll let you know as each approaches if they work for me or not. Mind you that spring is coming up and the girls have a busy schedule, and we all need to make sacrifices in our time with them because of it. More of the same. I evoked mediation, at this point, a requirement in our PSA before court. As soon as her lawyer was given notice, he wrote back that there was no issue as far as his client was concerned. He said his client and I had been cooperating and everything was fine. He asked my lawyer if this was about something else, and implied that I was just a jealous ex that she had gotten remarried and I was trying to punish her financially, with trying to scare her into giving up even more custody. My lawyer asked them to sign an agreement solidifying the date nights as a structured thing. And they rejected it, stating there was no reason to, that everything was okay, and I was getting the date nights already. So, we held on to all of the emails and waited for mediation, which just happened a couple weeks ago. Her lawyer was in the dark about the situation. He went in prepared to argue that I was interfering and causing drama. He had seen none of the emails. The judge sorted this out rather quickly. The good news is that her husband was there for the entire thing, in the other room with her. So maybe he has a bit of a window into this all now. I'm sure he's been a great emotional support for her, but when emotions are all you're dealing with, my ex has a way to spin them always to a role of victim. Everyone is out to get her in her mind. I am simply protecting my place in my daughter's lives. Expensive lesson here. It cost me north of $15,000 in legal fees, but I now have the established time outlined legally. Worth every penny, though I do realize this could have been avoided by having a less ambiguous PSA. Lesson I learned the hard way. Don't think your ex will always do what's in the kid's best interest. Make sure your rights are protected. My daughters are happy, and they were kept out of it for the most part. I think their only window into things were during the winter when they voiced frustration about why is mommy allowed to say no and you can't do anything about it. I told them it's a slow process, but that will change soon. We just need to work out the scheduling. Always reminding them that we both love them. Honestly, as twisted as their mother is from my perspective, I suppose in her own reality she's doing what she feels is best. Not an excuse for her behavior, but she's driven by her own methods. She thinks she's protecting her daughters. I'm in a role of disengaging as much as I can. She feeds off of the drama, so the less drama there is from her decisions, the less she does destructive things. The nice thing about going to mediation is that the judge, mediator, read through our entire PSA and found some other areas of potential conflict, and he forced them to the surface. He's a very smart guy and he got to the bottom of a lot. I brought up that she had been changing my information on medical forms, putting her own phone number and email under Dad's contact information on appointments, then pretending she didn't know what was going on. I caught her enough in this and had scanned printouts from offices day prior to appointment and then day after, showing the information had been changed when she took the girls. She was caught. The judge came up with a solution to have us use a digital calendar to share the girls' appointments and information with me. She's really against it, fought this idea, but eventually he convinced her she needs to do it. Remains to be seen if she's cooperated. I think she enjoys having the ability to manipulate information, thinking it'll cause problems for me. It was interesting to sit in their room, because everything the judge was saying seemed so obvious. But I'd never gone that route because I know how difficult she is, with everything, so I just minimize my expectations. Her goal is to minimize my role in my daughters' lives. When I show I'm upset about this, it just emboldens her to do more of it. But with time I've become so numb to this, it's just par for the course these days. Doesn't surprise me, so I don't react. This last year when she was rejecting the date nights, I would write emails, but from a very emotionless point. To be clear, I was sad on my daughter's behalf, because I know how upset they were not to get this time with me, but I recognized it did no good to express that to their mother. So, I just made everything logical and legal. And even though it took months, it worked out eventually. Anyway, onward and forward. Life is good otherwise. Work is great, my relationships are stronger than they've ever been. I've met what I can only describe as a soulmate. I know what love is. I've gotten back to my own passions in life, and I'm including my daughters in so many of them. Honestly, the weird thing in all of this, I am a bigger part of my daughters' lives now that I'm out of the dysfunction that was my marriage. I was living in the same house as them when married, but the marriage was so bad that I was floating around in a fog. My relationship with my daughters is so incredibly strong now, and they are growing up fast. They come to me with their thoughts, fears, ideas about life and how they are growing up and exploring their own friendships as their world expands. I love being a part of this and a support to them. I am proud that through this all, they've had each other. They are so protective of one another. It makes me smile. My focus is on my daughters' well-being and providing them the best support and parenting I can. I am actively involved in their lives on an almost daily basis. I feel like the most important presence in their lives. I am their stability. I'm a safe place they can be themselves and open up to. I have such a great relationship with them both. What my ex and her family thinks is something I can't control, nor do I care to. They know she cheated, and they know the details, and they choose to overlook it and create their own perception of it all, in supporting her and their agenda. My harping over it shows a weakness and defensiveness that is counterproductive. So, I let it go. And it doesn't help to show new husband what she's done either. What good does it do try to convince him that his new wife was this way? He'll reject it. I know I would in his shoes. And if I provided him the proof, what purpose does that serve? How does that help my daughters? Would he start making her accountable? Nope. It'll cause a lot of chaos in my daughters' lives. I don't expect her new husband to advocate for me. I'm not married to him. I've learned that telling her she's wrong in anything she does just emboldens her to do more of whatever that is, even at the girl's expense. So, I remove myself from the drama and ignore it, and seek legal recourse when it does impact my daughters, as I did successfully a few weeks ago with the date nights. I think this notion that I can somehow rage about the past, as if that's the way to gain respect and influence, is flawed. It's ego. Maybe it's helpful coming from the earlier stages of infidelity, but I'm 4 years out from it now. Yes, I wish I had been stronger in how I dealt with it 4 years ago. I was too nice back then because I wanted things to resolve harmoniously for my daughter's well-being. But it's not weakness now to not react to these situations. It's resolve and strength, moving on with my life, choosing to be positive and happy and choosing to allow my daughters to see that kind of way of living. I'm refusing to let the past drag me down. I'm more concerned with the things I can influence moving forward. My focus is on my relationship with my daughters and making that as productive and healthy as possible. My daughters are now 5 and 8. The 5-year-old is a sweetheart, emotional, certainly an empath. She's made me a lot softer in all of this. She loves to hug and has an incredible imagination. The 8-year-old is an inquisitive child, a rule follower with a desire to lead others. She's a very direct and honest child, and I've made a point to affirm her for those traits. She's outgoing and assertive. She is always trying to get to the bottom of things. So, I've been a place for her why questions. It's one of my favorite things, seeing the world through her eyes. Fun qualities to have in daughters. My 8-year-old has asked a handful of times about the divorce. Once a couple years ago when we were driving in the vicinity of our old house. She said, "Dad, remember when we used to live in that neighborhood?" And I said, "Yep, I remember the flower gardens." She goes, "Mom drove us by the house the other day and said she's really sad I don't have those friends anymore." Pause. Mom cried and said the reason we had to leave is because you left. She said this as a question, not a statement. This struck a nerve. I waited to gather myself with an appropriate response. "That's not true, sweetie. We moved out of the house because your mother and I were no longer together. I didn't leave." About 30 minutes later, once I had had time to compose a better response, I brought it up and explained to her at a 6-year-old level what happened. I asked if she remembered emotional affair guy. She did. My ex-wife had him around the kids a lot. She was physical with him around them too, I found out. Ugh, and she said yes. So, I explained, when you're married you have all kinds of people in your life, and that's okay, but that your family should always come first and be your top priority, your focus. I said that her mother made another man a higher priority than me, and when I found out about it and asked her to stop, 9 months later she still hadn't chosen to put me first in her life. When said she couldn't stop giving this other adult more attention than me, that meant the marriage ended and we sold the house because of it. Re-emphasized to her how this has nothing to do with her or her sister or how much we love them. About a month ago she asked, and I suspect it's because she's trying to organize her thoughts about how she's about to have a new younger sister. She's now 8. It came up while we were having dinner one-on-one. "Daddy, I remember when you told me how you and Mom split. I have friends with families like ours. They have 2 parents, and I wanted to know why you and Mom didn't. You know, go together." She was using her hands to interlock as she said it. It was cute. I basically gave her the same story as above, but I added a bit more about the importance of the relationship between a husband and wife. I reminded her it was never my choice to divorce, but that her mother made a decision to prioritize another man over me, and I used the term boyfriend, and told her you can't have a boyfriend that you do intimate things with when you're married. She said, like kissing and hugging, and I said exactly. That I asked her to stop and gave her time and a second chance, but she chose not to change her behavior. I related this to her view, which seems wider now. It's involving her friends. I told her that father-in-law is now mommy's priority. They are married, and because they are married that means mommy has now promised him she will put him first in her life. It's his job to make her number one and her job to make him number one. As far as other adults go, once you make the commitment to marry, it's important to keep it. That's why you should never get married unless you can fully commit, which is how I was raised, and how I'm raising you. I said that's why it's my job to make sure you choose a guy who will commit to putting you first in his life. And I joked that as her father it's my job to set straight the guys who want to marry her. I said this in a funny voice to lighten the mood a bit. She laughed about this and smiled. My 8-year-old often comes to me with questions that appear to be her getting to the bottom of inconsistencies in what she's hearing versus what she knows. She went through a phase about a year ago of frustration and calling her mother a liar quite a bit. Like toys she would take to her mother's house would disappear, and her mom would blame her for losing them. But she would tell me she went to sleep knowing it was on her nightstand and wake up and it wasn't there. Also the times she would say Mom always says one thing but then she does something else, and she never apologizes for her mistakes, but she expects us to. Her mother blamed me for her daughter calling her a liar, saying I vilified her. But the irony here is that her parenting has created the view her daughter had of her, while I actively work to create a dynamic of harmony where my daughter can learn how to avoid the situations where she's ended up with these negative emotions. This seems to have receded, and I suspect her new husband might be helping calm their mother down in that household. Just a guess, but I don't get the sense she loses it and yells at them like she used to. Anyway, I'm trying to show my daughters how much of life is learning to deal with situations that present themselves around them. If toys disappear at Mom's house, then let's just keep your most important ones here unless we see them stop disappearing kind of thing. I suspect that their mother being a bit of a controlling figure. She basically wants to dictate what her daughters think, feel and believe. I've been told they are sometimes put in timeout for saying what they feel, think. If it's not agreeable to what their mom feels, thinks, is not meshing well at all with my 8-year-old. She's but already starting to form her own methods to cope with the environment, from what I've seen. Her younger sister is much more of an emotional child. I have an equally positive relationship with her, however, she's getting wrapped up much more in the games of how people feel around her. She has been showing a big heart towards how I'm feeling. She reacts so amazingly well to positives. Like saying something she does makes me smile. I've been working on that a lot with her. Positivity, showing her that she has the power to change people's lives with her kind heart. She's so into all the fairy tales, I love it. This has really opened up a great dynamic with us. Kids are so drawn to positive things. So, my job has been to direct them both there and away from the negatives. in that they feel safe and we have very open relationships. She hasn't asked about the split. She was so young that I don't think she ever knew it any other way. I also think her sister is actually doing an amazing job of helping her cope with her emotions. I was so proud of the way they handled the situation recently. In January, I took the girls to Orlando when they got home. As the 8-year-old tells it, Mom is weird. So, she wanted to know how Orlando was. I told her about my favorite ride, remember the safari park? Well, she then only said negative things. Like only negative. So, I decided to stop talking about it. I told to stop talking to Mom about it also, because I don't want to hear bad things about something I enjoyed. Such a rational mind this child is. He cracks me up sometimes. Looked in the rear-view mirror at her and spoke. What could she possibly say that's negative about Orlando? And my 8-year-old said it was silly, like she went, exaggerated tone. I'm so sad I didn't get to go with you guys, to which I said, that's silly, we aren't married, and my daughter said I know. I said maybe you should take us too, and she got angry at me and said I was talking back. I can see how that kind of language would really impact the 5-year-old, who would feel guilty about traveling without her mother. My 8-year-old is a lot more rational and sees it as silly antics. I think I have an uphill battle with the 5-year-old, but I think that her older sister will be a huge help along the way. My strategy right now is to teach my 5-year-old how incredible she is, for whom she is, and give her an empowering sense of self, to be who she wants to be. I think this will do a lot to counter any sense of attachment, enmeshment, she may develop otherwise. Also, a huge reason I believe the new baby in the other home is going to be a great thing. It's going to take the spotlight off my daughters. There is a new focus. This will help them both mature a bit more and get out from under that wing, with a bit more independence. Critical at these ages, to have that freedom to see the world on their own while still knowing they can fall back on Mom and Dad for help and guidance. I'm sharing all of the worst here. There is a good too. My daughters talk a lot about what they enjoy. It's been important to me to have that open line of communication. They've been coached to not talk about fun stuff they do with me, while at the other house, it seems. It feels as though it's been perceived as a taboo mainly because it makes Mom sad. And so, the irony of that is that their mother gets to avoid hearing the good we do, but she's also teaching her daughters to compartmentalize and close off a part of themselves to her. I've been careful to not be anything like that, at all. I'm happy to engage with them in the good times, stories about their family time together, vacations, and the things they do in the other home. I also tell them always, no secrets between the homes, that I won't ask them to keep a secret from their mom and she shouldn't ask them to keep anything from me. That it's for their safety that they be able to share all of their thoughts, feelings, and what they experience with both of us. The older they get, the easier this seems to become. I guess we shall have to wait and see how the teenage years go. My comment, OP is one of the better OP out there. He is focused on his young ones after the divorce, and he seek what is better for his relationship in the end. One of the better marriage lessons we have encountered so far. Do you agree? Sub and comment down for the next lesson.